The centerpiece of my grandmother's dining room table was a ceramic turkey she'd painted herself in 1987. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every Easter, it sat in the middle of whatever she'd made, chipped on one wing from the time my brother knocked it over when he was 7. She never replaced it. She said imperfect things had the most character. My grandmother passed 2 years before everything fell apart. I think about that turkey a lot now. My name doesn't matter as much as the story, but you can call me by what I was in that family. The responsible one. The one who showed up early and stayed late. The one who remembered birthdays and called on Sundays and didn't need anything from anyone. The invisible one. My brother. I'll call him what he's always been. The favorite. He's 4 years older than me. Growing up, the gap between how my parents treated us wasn't subtle. It was the kind of obvious that everyone could see, but no one said out loud, the way people don't comment on a smell in someone else's house. You just breathe through it and move on. When I was 9, I wanted to take piano lessons. There was a woman 3 blocks over who charged $40 a month. My father said we couldn't afford it. 2 weeks later, my brother joined a travel baseball league that cost $600 for the season, plus equipment, plus gas to drive him to games 2 states away on weekends. I didn't say anything. I was 9. I added it to the list I didn't know I was keeping. When I was 13, my school offered a trip to Washington, D.C. 4 days, educational, $280, with all meals included. My mother said it wasn't in the budget. That same spring, my parents threw my brother a 16th birthday party with a rented pavilion and a DJ. I counted the cars in the parking lot of that rented space. I counted them because I had nothing else to do. I wasn't really part of the celebration, just someone who happened to share a last name with the guest of honor. I stopped asking for things after that. It was easier. When you stop asking, you stop being disappointed. And when you stop being disappointed, you can almost convince yourself it doesn't matter. But things have a way of mattering even when you tell them not to. I got a scholarship to state school. Partial, but enough that with a part-time job I could manage. My parents contributed nothing, which was fine. I hadn't expected them to. My brother's college, on the other hand, was fully funded by them. Different university, more expensive, including a semester abroad. I nephews because my mother told me proudly at Christmas my freshman year, while I was quietly calculating whether I could afford a new winter coat or if the one with the broken zipper would last another season. I smiled and nodded. I was good at that. After college, I built something. Nothing dramatic. Just a life. The ordinary kind, assembled piece by piece the way you do when no one hands you anything. I got a job in logistics management. I saved carefully. I rented a small apartment 40 minutes from my parents' house, close enough for Sunday dinners, but far enough that I could breathe. My brother bounced. That's the only word for it. Job to job, city to city, relationship to relationship. He was always figuring things out, always in the middle of something that was about to take off. My parents talked about him constantly. Every phone call was his latest project, his latest idea, his potential. They said his name like it was a prayer. They said mine like it was a reminder. I met someone in my late 20s, a good man, steady, funny, the kind of person who fixes things before you notice they're broken. We dated for 2 years, got engaged quietly, planned a wedding neither of us wanted to be complicated. My parents came to the engagement dinner and spent most of it talking about whether my brother might bring his new girlfriend, who none of us had met. We got married on a Saturday in October. Small ceremony. My parents were there. It was fine. What I mean is, it was fine the way most things in my family were fine. Functional. Present. Missing something I couldn't name out loud. I didn't ask my parents for help with the wedding. I didn't ask for anything. By then, the not asking was reflexive, built into me like a habit so old I'd forgotten acquiring it. The year my daughter was born, our first small and furious and perfect, my parents visited twice. The first time my brother called during the visit and my mother spent 45 minutes on the phone with him while my husband held the baby and I sat on the couch pretending I was not keeping count. I was keeping count. The thing about being the invisible child is that you develop a kind of hyper-awareness. You notice everything because you've learned that you will not be noticed. You watch dynamics, read rooms, track inconsistencies. It's not a skill I asked for. It's what you grow when you spend years trying to understand why you are never quite enough. So when my parents started acting strange about the house, I noticed. My parents had lived in that house for 31 years. 3 bedrooms, finished basement, half-acre lot in a suburb that had gotten more valuable as the years passed. My grandmother had helped them with the down payment, back before I was born, a gift she'd made to both her children equally. My parents bought out my uncle's share years later. The house was worth something now, a lot actually, in a market that had climbed steadily and showed no sign of stopping. I didn't know the exact number, but I had a rough sense. I worked in logistics, not real estate, but I understood assets. The strangeness started small. My parents began bringing it up in odd ways. Not the house itself exactly, but adjacent things. Taxes, upkeep. How much work a house that age required. My mother mentioned, twice, that the roof had been redone. My father talked once about estate planning in a way that seemed rehearsed, like he'd thought about how to introduce the subject. I filed it away. I do that. Then my brother moved back. He showed up with 2 suitcases and a story about a business partnership that had fallen through. Not his fault, of course, these things happen. The other party had been unreasonable. He moved into his old bedroom. My parents were delighted. The house felt full again, my mother said. Like the old days. I visited for Sunday dinner 3 weeks after he moved back and watched my father cut my brother a second piece of pie before he'd finished his first, the way you do for a guest you're trying to impress, and I thought, something is happening. I didn't know what yet, but something was happening. My husband noticed too. He's perceptive in the quiet way that doesn't announce itself. On the drive home, he said, "Your brother's not just visiting, is he?" I said I didn't know. He said, "Yeah, you do." He was right. I did. I just hadn't let myself form the thought all the way yet. What I learned later, pieced together from a conversation with my mother's sister, who has always been honest with me in ways my parents never were, was that my brother had asked for the house. Not to buy it. To have it. He proposed that my parents sign it over to him as an early inheritance, with the understanding that they could continue living there as long as they wanted. He'd framed it as practical. He'd take over the property taxes, the maintenance, the upkeep. My parents, who were in their late 60s and starting to feel it, found this appealing. They also, I suspect, found it appealing because it was my brother asking. It was always easier to say yes to him. What my brother had not told them, or perhaps had genuinely not bothered to find out. And I was never entirely sure which was the actual financial state of the house. Here's what I had found out on my own, because I am the kind of person who finds things out. The property taxes on that house were almost $9,000 a year, and my parents were 14 months behind. There was a lien. Not a small one. The county had filed, which meant that any transfer of the property would require the lien to be satisfied first. If the lien wasn't resolved, whoever held the title would be responsible, and eventually, if it went far enough, the county could move to collect. Additionally, my parents had taken out a home equity line of credit 6 years earlier to fund, among other things, my brother's investment in a restaurant venture that had closed within 18 months. The balance on that line was not small. My aunt told me all of this one afternoon over coffee at her kitchen table. She had accessed none of it illegally. Property tax records are public, liens are filed with the county. None of it was hidden to anyone who thought to look. She had thought to look because she, like me, had been watching the strangeness with increasing concern. "They're going to sign it over to him," she said, "and he doesn't understand what he's agreeing to take on, and neither do they." I said, "Does anyone know I'm not being included in this conversation at all?" She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Sweetheart, I think they're hoping you don't notice." I sat with that for a while. Then I went home, and I thought about the piano lessons I never took. I thought about Washington, D.C. and the ceramic turkey with the chipped wing. I thought about every Sunday dinner where my name came up last. Every holiday where my brother's life was the main event and mine was the backdrop. Every moment I had spent making myself smaller to avoid the ache of being overlooked. And I thought about something else too. I didn't want that house. That's important to understand. I want to be clear about this because I think people assume, in stories like mine, that the wronged party is fighting for a share of something they covet. I did not want the house. I had my own home, my husband, my daughter, my life. What I wanted, what I had always wanted, was to be seen, to be considered, to be included in a conversation that concerned me, even if the answer was ultimately no. I was not consulted. I was not mentioned. I was being managed around. That's different from being told no. That's being treated as someone whose reaction needs to be controlled rather than whose feelings deserve respect. So I made a decision. I was not going to blow anything up. I was not going to call my parents and make accusations or demand explanations. I was going to wait. I was going to let the situation arrive at me in its own time, and when it did, I was going to be ready. I didn't have to wait long. 3 weeks later, my mother called and asked if we could all get together for dinner. Not a holiday, just dinner, she said. A family dinner. She missed seeing everyone together. She had a way of doing this, scheduling things in neutral language when the actual purpose was something else. I said yes. I brought my husband. I drove to the house I grew up in. The table was set the way it only gets set when something is being celebrated or announced. The good dishes, not the everyday ones. Candles. My mother had made pot roast, which she only makes for occasions. My brother was there with his girlfriend, who I had now met twice. She was pleasant and a little nervous in the way people are when they've been briefed on a family dynamic they're not entirely sure they understand. We ate. We talked. I watched my father not meet my eyes more than twice during the meal, which told me everything. After dessert, my mother's apple cake, which I actually love, and which I ate slowly because I knew what was coming and I wanted one more quiet minute before it arrived. My brother cleared his throat. He had that look he gets. I've known it since we were children. It's the look he wears when he believes he's about to receive something. He said that he had something to share with everyone. He said that Mom and Dad had made a decision, a generous decision, and he wanted everyone to hear it together. He said they were signing the house over to him. He would be taking on responsibility for the property, and they would continue living there comfortably, and it was a wonderful solution for everyone. He smiled at me when he said everyone. His girlfriend looked at her plate. My mother looked at my father. My father looked at my father. My father looked at the centerpiece. I felt my husband's hand find mine under the table. I thought about the piano. I thought about the turkey. I looked at my brother, and then I looked at my father, and I said, very calmly, "Do you want to tell him what comes with it, or should I?" The room went quiet the way rooms only go quiet when something has shifted and no one is certain yet what it means. My father said, "What?" I said, "The lien, Dad. The county tax lien on the property and the HELOC balance. I'm just wondering if you've walked him through all of it or if we're celebrating something he doesn't have complete information about." My brother laughed. It was the short, dismissive laugh he uses when he wants to signal that something isn't worth taking seriously. He said I didn't know what I was talking about. I said I'd be happy to be wrong. I said property records were public. I said the lien was filed in October of the year before last and was a matter of county record. I said the home equity line of credit showed up in a title search and that any transfer of property would require it to be addressed. I said I'd look this up. Because I had. The laugh stopped. My father put down his fork. My mother said my name in the tone she uses when she wants me to stop. The tone that used to work when I was small and needed her approval. It didn't work now. I wasn't small anymore, and I had spent a lot of years learning not to need things that weren't being offered. I said I wasn't trying to ruin anything. I said I was genuinely asking whether everyone at the table had the same information, because that seemed important before anyone signed anything. I said it was possible my brother knew all of this and had a plan, and if so, I'd love to hear it. My brother did not have a plan. I could see it in his face. The rapid recalculation, the scramble behind his eyes. He looked at my father and said, "What is she talking about?" And my father, for maybe the first time in my brother's adult life, did not have an answer that made things better. What unfolded over the next 40 minutes was not a fight exactly. It was more like a structure collapsing slowly, not all at once, but piece by piece, each part holding on just a moment longer than the one before it. My brother wanted to know why he hadn't been told about the lien. My parents said they thought it would be resolved. He wanted to know how. They didn't have a clear answer. He wanted to know about the HELOC, the balance, what it had been used for, what the repayment terms were. My mother cried. My father went very quiet. My brother's girlfriend excused herself to use the restroom and did not come back for a long time. I sat at that table with my apple cake and I did not perform anger because I wasn't angry. What I felt was something older and more tired than anger. I felt the relief of a person who has been holding their breath for a very long time and has finally, in some small way, been allowed to exhale. I hadn't destroyed anything. I had turned on a light. What was visible under it had been there all along. At some point, my brother looked at me and said this was my fault, that I had come here to sabotage this for him, that I was jealous. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "I'm not here to take anything from you. I never was. I just wasn't willing to watch you walk into something without knowing what it was." He didn't say anything to that. My husband drove us home. My daughter was with a babysitter and I called to check on her and she was fine, already asleep, peaceful and small and entirely unaware of the family she'd been born into. I sat in the passenger seat and watched the highway lights pass, and I felt the particular exhaustion that follows not a confrontation, but a truth. The house was not signed over, at least not that night, and not the way my brother had imagined. My parents eventually hired an estate attorney, something they should have done years earlier, who laid out the actual financial picture and began the process of addressing the lien before any transfer could occur. My brother did end up staying in the house for a time, though the conversation about the terms became considerably more complicated than a simple gift. I was not consulted in those conversations either, but that was fine. I had long since stopped expecting to be. What changed was smaller than that and more lasting. My father called me 2 weeks after that dinner. He didn't apologize exactly. My father is not a person who apologizes in full sentences, but he said, "You did your homework." It was the most acknowledgement I had ever received from him, and I sat with it for a while after we hung up, trying to decide how I felt. I decided I felt okay. Not healed, not resolved, just okay. Which, after everything, was more than I'd expected. I still have a picture of my grandmother's turkey. My mother sent it to me years ago in one of her periodic efforts to clear things out of the house. The turkey sits on my kitchen shelf now, next to a plant my daughter tried to grow from a seed last spring. The plant didn't come in fully. It's more of a hopeful stub than anything else, but she waters it every morning before school without being asked. She's stubborn in the best way. She gets it from me. I think about what I would tell her someday, when she's old enough to understand family in all its complicated forms. I think I would tell her this. You do not have to be the loudest person in the room to be the most prepared. You do not have to fight for things that were never going to be given to you. You just have to know what is true and be willing to say it when the moment comes. The moment always comes. And when it does, you want to be the person who did the homework. I keep coming back to that ceramic turkey with the chipped wing. My grandmother never replaced it because she believed broken things still had value. I think she was trying to tell me something I wasn't old enough to hear yet. What happened at that dinner table wasn't really about a house. It was about a pattern that had been running for 30 years, quietly, underneath everything. The piano lessons that didn't happen, the school trip I didn't take, the birthday party I attended as furniture. Every one of those moments was small enough to dismiss on its own. Together, they were a map. And maps, if you learn to read them, tell you exactly where you are. I used to think that being overlooked was something I had to survive. What I understand now is that surviving it wasn't enough. I had to decide what kind of person I was going to be on the other side of it. And that decision didn't happen at the dinner table that night. It happened in all the years before it, in all the quiet moments when I chose to pay attention instead of give up, to build something instead of resent what I didn't have, to do the work even when no one was watching. That's the thing people don't talk about when they tell stories like this. The moment, the fork dropping, the room going silent, the question that changes everything. That moment is just the surface. Underneath it is every early morning you got yourself up, every bill you figured out alone, every time you kept your word when no one would have known if you hadn't. Character isn't built in the dramatic scenes. It's built in the ordinary ones, when the stakes feel low and the effort feels thankless, and you do the right thing anyway because it's the right thing anyway because it's the right. My aunt looked up those property records because she cared enough to be honest with me when my own parents weren't. My husband held my hand under that table because he is a person who shows up. My daughter waters a half-dead plant every morning because she decided it deserved a chance. These are the people and the moments that tell you who you are and what you've built. My brother walked into that dinner believing he was about to receive something for free. What he didn't understand, what I think my parents didn't fully understand either, is that there is no such thing. Everything costs something. The question is only whether you've done the accounting before or after the fact. I did mine before. That's the whole story, really. Not that I was smarter or luckier or more loved, just that I learned, somewhere in all those years of being the invisible one, that the only person I could fully count on was myself. And instead of making me bitter, that knowledge made me careful, made me thorough, made me the kind of person who checks the county records before she walks into a room. I don't know if my parents will ever fully reckon with what they did. Not the house, but the years before it. I've stopped waiting for that. What I know is that my daughter will not grow up wondering if she is worth the same as the person sitting next to her. I will make sure of that. Not with grand gestures, but with the small, consistent ones that actually stick. The turkey sits on my kitchen shelf. My daughter's plant is still stubbornly alive. Some things hold on longer than anyone expects them to.